Good afternoon. I'm Ruth Ryder, and I'm the current chair of One Buchanan. We welcome you to this, our 7th forum. A little bit about One Buchanan. One Buchanan was established in 2016 in response to the emerging need for unity across the nation. One Buchanan was founded with a particular concern for those who have experienced discrimination or exclusion. One Buchanan's mission is to promote awareness of our rich diversity through education, activities, and programs that strengthen an inclusive community. We envision that One Buchanan is the catalyst to create an inclusive I'm still good? Okay, sorry about that. Inclusive community. We currently have a diverse board of 13 members. We meet monthly to organize educational forums such as this and events. We also participate in community events and celebrations. In 2018, One Buchanan was established as a corporation LLC, and as of January 2021, One Buchanan partnered with the City of Buchanan and became a city board under the city umbrella as a nonprofit status. One Buchanan will help ensure the city slogan, "Life is Better Here." Our first educational forum was held in 2018 to introduce One Buchanan to the Buchanan community. That was followed by a forum focusing on Native Americans with the issues both nationally and locally. In 2019, One Buchanan had a third forum on Black history with presentations by members of our local Black community. In 2021, after a hiatus with COVID, our forums returned with 2 events on mental health and as a result of COVID. This spring we had a 6th forum on ageism, and this is our 7th forum, and we welcome our panel and our wonderful people who came this afternoon. The other major event that we have been involved with for 2 years is One Book, One Buchanan. Thus far, 2 books were distributed to our community, to anyone who wanted them, and this then was discussed by residents at the Commons. Those books were CASTE, C-A-S-T-E, and High Conflict, one in 2021 and one in 2022. I now would like to bring Dr. Harvey Burnett up, who is the moderator this afternoon. Again, welcome and thank you for coming.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone to another wonderful forum. And of course, if you're out there in the audience, we are glad to have you here. And if you're joining us on the Facebook live streaming and however that thing works, we are glad to have you here as well. We have an expert panel of people here that are going to provide some information. Again, we're focusing on disability and the Impairment Forum here. Very important programming and things, and so I'm going to give you a little rundown real quick of how things will work this afternoon. Of course, you heard Ruth Ryder provide the introduction to understanding One Buchanan and who they are and things like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to break this down into 2 parts. We're going to have several of our speakers speak first, and then we're going to have a break after a short question and answer, and then we're going to have our last 2 panelists speak, and then public questions and dialogue will happen, and then we'll close it up with One Buchanan Chair Ruth Ryder giving that information and things. So as you can look to my right, I have to think about this for a minute. To my right, probably to your left, we have a series of panelists. They do have bios that are in our packets here. I'm not going to read them, but you are welcome to read them for yourselves to kind of get a little bit more background. Of course, we have Dr. Randy Gross. Raise your hands and wave. Hello. Rob Gross. We'll go with Dr. Rob. He's there. We also have Candace Kohlberg. Very good. And she's waving. And then we have Cindy Gray. right? And I want to just say that Dr. Rob here is a music composer, and he will be talking about some other things related to understanding disabilities and impairments. Candace is with Berrien RESA, and she'll be talking more about that and the services there. And then Cindy Gray, right here, she is with Disability Network. So these will be our first three. They're going to have 15 to 20 minutes to share information with us. We'll have a question and answer, then we're going to break, and then we're going to come down to two of our One Buchanan members, Ann Reed, right? She's going to be speaking, as well as Lisa Dahl. Right? So that is where we're at and things. And of course, you also can participate. So as we're going through our forum here this afternoon, please, if you have a question that you want to ask our panelists, right, please write them down, get them to me so we can ask those questions while we have them here, right? If you have an inspirational thought to share, you know, write that down and I will share it as long as it's something very cool, right? But anyway, as we move forward, we're now going to jump into having our panelists speak, and we're going to be starting with Cindy Gray. What? Oh, I was not told the right order, but anyway, I was going based on in here. But we will jump around. Oh, okay. Are we supposed to start that way and go this way? We always improvise and adapt and overcome, all right? Improvise, adapt, overcome. Yeah, this is not a Star Trek Borg thing, but what we'll do is we'll reflip it around to follow so everybody doesn't get confused. I like to jump around. That's just how we are. These psychologist people just do whatever we want, right? But we'll just start with going down the row, and we're going to start with Dr. Rob, all right?
Okay.
All right.
Sure. I'll go first. Is my mic on? It is? Okay, great. So I'm Dr. Robert Gross. I did want to be up front. My doctorate is actually in music composition. My music therapy degree is a master's. So I don't have a doctorate in music therapy. I want to be clear about that. I do have a master's. I know a little about what I'm talking about. And I came with prepared notes, so forgive me if I'm not extemporizing as much as might be nice to do. So the question is, what is music therapy? You know, you may be wondering, that's what I do with disabled clients. I am a music therapist, board certified. So you may be asking yourself, well, what is music therapy? So here's a comic strip I drew called Maggie, the Intrepid Music Therapy Student, which I drew when I was myself a music therapy student. In the first panel, Maggie is holding her guitar, and a friend of hers is asking, so you're a music therapy major. What's music therapy? In the second panel, the friend gives a wild guess. Is it, by any chance, the clinical and evidence-based of music interventions to accomplish individualized goals within a therapeutic relationship by a credentialed music professional who has completed an approved music therapy program? And in the final panel, Maggie confirms it. She says, well, yeah. And her friend says, cool. So here's the official definition. The first paragraph I just read to you, the clinical and evidence-based use of music interventions to accomplish individualized goals within a therapeutic music program by a credentialed professional who has completed an approved music therapy program, like the one I went to at Texas Women's University. Music therapy is an established health profession in which music is used within a therapeutic relationship to address physical, emotional, cognitive, social needs of individuals. After assessing strengths and needs of each client, the qualified music therapist provides indicated treatment including creating, singing, moving to, or listening to music. Through musical involvement in the therapeutic context, clients' abilities are strengthened and transferred into other areas of their lives. So music therapy provides avenues for communication that can be helpful to those who find it difficult to express themselves in words. And you can think of a number of populations that this may apply to. Research in music therapy itself supports its effectiveness in many areas such as overall physical rehabilitation, facilitating movement, increasing people's motivation to become engaged in their treatment, and providing emotional support for clients and their families, and providing an outlet for feelings. Music therapy is often uses music for non-musical goals. So some of these non-musical goals may include lowering blood pressure, improving memory, enhancing communication and social skills through experiencing music with others, self-reflection, observing musical thoughts and emotions, reducing muscle tension, self-regulation, developing healthy coping skills to manage thoughts and emotions, increasing motivation, managing pain, and increasing joy. Music therapy is evidence-based. The partnership with music and medicine mandates that music therapy is an evidence-based practice whose techniques are founded on peer-reviewed research. Now, what's that, peer-reviewed research? Well, that means that anonymous music therapists with experience scientifically testing their methods are the ones evaluating the research. So, an example of a typical recent music therapy research article might be Dementia-Inclusive Group Singing Online During COVID-19, a Qualitative Exploration. And here is the abstract or summary of what that research entails. There is increasing evidence of the social, physical, and cognitive benefits of group singing for people living with dementia and their family carers. However, COVID-19 has necessitated the suspension of in-person group singing globally. This study explores the impact of COVID-19 on dementia-inclusive singing groups and choirs in Ireland and their facilitators' responses. It seeks to contribute to the limited literature on online group singing and music telehealth for people living with dementia and family carers. So in other words, they're basically saying, let's see how people respond to music that is given to them online during the COVID-19 pandemic, and let's see if group singing still has as much therapeutic benefit to people as group singing does in person. Now, I don't happen to know the conclusion of the article, but that's what this is doing. This is a typical example of music therapy research. Some history. Music was and is used as part of healing rituals in pre-literate cultures. Music played part in both rational medicine and magical religious healing ceremonies in the first civilizations around 5,000 to 6,000 BCE, before Common Era. In the height of Babylonian culture, 1850 BCE, disease was viewed within a religious framework. Treatment consisted of religious ceremony in which music was involved. Music was regarded as a special force over thought, emotion, and physical health in ancient Greece around 600 BCE. Rational investigations into the cause of diseases superseded religious explanations. Polybus, the son-in-law of Hippocrates around 380 BCE, theorized 4 humors as the cause of health versus disease. These are blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. You may have heard of these. Good health was theorized as a balance of the humors. Music was thought to help keep the humors in balance. So during the Middle Ages, around 476 to 1450 Common Era, music was based on the theory of the 4 humors. Society started to care for the physically ill, though not the mentally ill people in the Middle Ages. During the Renaissance, that's 1450 to 1600, advances in anatomy, physiology, and clinical medicine marked the beginning of the scientific approach to medicine. Okay, music in the United States. The earliest, here's just some examples. The earliest reference was an anonymous author in Columbian Magazine in 1789. Based on the ideas of the French philosopher Descartes, I think, therefore I am, that guy, and his famous plane, which troubled me to no end in high school, the author made the case that music can be used to regulate emotional conditions and that emotional conditions had an impact on physical health. I'm going to skip ahead. The first course in music therapy was at a university offered by Margaret Anderton, who offered music therapy to Canadian soldiers who were, acquired physical and mental disabilities as a result of World War I. So this is really where music therapy picks up in the United States. World War I was the cause. She taught classes at Columbia University on how to treat wounded soldiers. Like her predecessor, who was a woman named Eva Vasilius, she believed musicians should be thoroughly trained as therapists before practicing music therapy. So these are, Eva Vasilius was really the first, and then Margaret Anderton came along and took up the cause as well. A lot of women, by the way, were the first music therapists, and it's a primarily female-dominated profession to this day, which is interesting. I don't know exactly why. I'm an exception, obviously. He, him, his. Harriet Ayer Seymour worked with World War I veterans as well, and she published a guide called What Music Can Do for You. For 25 years, she promoted music therapy through writing and practical demonstrations. She was also funded by the Works Progress Administration under the Roosevelt administration. In 1950, music therapy became a formal profession rather than an enterprise of volunteers. The leading figure was a fellow named E. Thayer Gaston, who established the NAMT and started the first program in music therapy at the University of Kansas. The NAMT established the RMT credential, which was an assurance to employers that the therapist had met the educational and clinical standards of the NAMT and the National Association for Schools of Music. That is superseded today. The NAMT combined with a rival group called the AAMT, kind of like the National League and the American League, and the American Music Therapy Association was formed out of that merger, and their credential is my credential, the MTBC, which means Music Therapist Board Certified. Now, I wanted to talk a bit about working with autistic people with music therapy. So I need to talk first about a term that autistic people themselves favor, which is neurodiversity. According to the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, the term neurodiversity is defined as follows. Neurodiversity means that no two brains are exactly the same. Every person has things they are good at and things they need help with, and there's no such thing as a normal brain. The neurodiversity movement says people with brain-based disabilities like autism, intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities, or mental health disabilities, and by the way, that would include me as I am a person with depression chronically, which is treated. The neurodiversity movement also says we shouldn't try to cure or get rid of autism. Autistic people should be allowed to exist, and we should work to make sure that everyone gets the accommodations we need to reach our full potential. Autistic Self-Advocacy Network believes in the ideas of the neurodiversity movement and works to make sure all autistic people are celebrated for our differences instead of excluded. So with that in mind, my approach to autism or autistic people is collaborative, not curative. You can't really cure autism, and certainly not with music. I tend to emphasize two techniques with autistic clients, songwriting and choice making, because I want to create engagement and rapport with my clients. So songwriting with a client that I'm calling Brian, which is a pseudonym. I can't, HIPAA forbids me from, revealing anything in particular, is a songwriter that I worked with in writing songs together. He would typically write the lyrics, and I would provide the music. And the topics that we wrote about were myriad. He wrote about wishing he could move from Indiana. Well, we can understand that, can't we, as Michiganders? He wrote about bullying. He wrote about dancing, love and relationships, hope and perseverance, family. Coping with quarantine was a big one because that was something that we were all going through. Summertime and being yourself. And Brian had also had a speech impediment, and it was interesting to me that as we wrote songs together, when he was giving me lyrics, his speech became less pressured and more intelligible, and I thought that was a very interesting phenomenon. With Ryan, a 10-year-old autistic boy with limited speech, we collaborated on musical storytelling, and I'm going to do a little bit of that right now. So Spider-Man was a favorite theme of Ryan's. He was about 10, 11 years old. So I would start every session by playing the Spider-Man theme. Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can, spins a web any size. Can't you see, just like flies, look out, here comes the Spider-Man. Okay, so that I'd start with Spider-Man, and then I would start the story. So Peter Parker one day was roaming in the streets, and suddenly a villain showed up. A villain! And so I'd play minor keys for the villain, and then I would ask, who's the villain, Ryan? And Ryan would say, Green Goblin! Green Goblin! Bum, 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 bum. Bum. Okay, so Green Goblin is attacking the city. What are we going to do, Ryan? What are we going to do? And he'd say, webs. Okay, we're going to shoot some webs at him. Oh, Spider-Man needs some help. He's going down. Who's going to help him, Ryan? And Ryan would say, the Hulk. The Hulk. Bum, bum. Here comes the Hulk. Here comes the Hulk. Hulk smash! And so on and so forth. And I would add a musical element to it to make it fun and engaging. But the point is that Ryan would be, I'm going to just move this over if you don't mind. Ryan would be engaged and would feel prompted to speak and to show verbal communication, but in a way that is not forced, in a way that is not pressured. You know, that's, like you're in school. I always felt like if the client feels like they're in school, then I'm not doing my job. So another technique that I used to use, a lot of autistic kids are co-presenting with speech impediments, or speech impairments rather, and I was working for a speech pathologist for a while, and she charged me to write songs using alliterative phonemes. So I brought one, and what I'd like you to do is just sing along with me. I'm going to sing a phrase, you sing it back to me. And this phoneme is the CH phoneme, as you'll quickly ascertain. Oh, my Chihuahua likes to play chess. Sometimes he cheats, thinks he's the best, thinks he's in charge, does what he please. He likes chocolate, he eats my cheese, and I ran out of batteries on my keyboard, but that's okay. You get the idea. You get the idea. So the idea here is this would be in a group setting with a bunch of kiddos. And my point would be that the kiddos would be strength in numbers. You know, nobody feels singled out when they're singing along. And we'd sing silly songs, and I would actually ask them to contribute, their own lines to the songs so that there's a creative element to it, and so on and so forth. And it's a way to get kids practicing in a way that is not, again, not forcible. It's more collaborative in nature. It's more unilateral. I'm sort of having kind of an egalitarian relationship with my clients, which is something that I really believe in. Again, therapy is not something like, eat your green vegetables, young man, or else. I really think that it's important to make music therapy fun, especially for kids, as much as I possibly can. Okay, so that's pretty much it for me. This is my email address. Feel free to get in touch with me anytime if you have questions or comments or anything of interest. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Rob, for that. And of course, I love the sing-along, so maybe we'll do some more of that for you all out there. Right, Dr. Rob? Right? So all right, we're going to move on to our next panelist, and Candace, right, from Berrien RESA, and you are on stage. Take it away.
All right. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I think I'm ready to sign up for music therapy. That seems like really fun stuff. I like it. Well, let's see. So, in my bio, it talks about that I work for Berrien RESA, and Berrien RESA, provides a variety of special education and general education services to students all around the county. Part of that is special education, like I said, and the work that I do is under the kind of the special education umbrella. So some students are visually impaired, and those are the ones that I get. I also work with two consultants for the visually impaired, and they do more academic support and independent living skills, technology support, that sort of stuff. And of the, maybe they usually have about 30 kids in our county. Over the years, that seems to be about how many, 30-ish. And I usually get about a third of those. So it's for students whose vision is at that legal blindness spot, which is 20/200 or less. So I have all the way to kids with no eyes, prosthetic eyes. So those are the students that somebody decided, oh, they might have, based on that level of vision, they might have trouble getting around safely or independently. So I evaluate those kinds of kids. And, you know, for sure the goal is that they be able to keep track of where they're going, move around safely and independently in their home. And that's where I always start. We work with kids all the way from birth, which I don't do a whole lot with somebody if they just were born yesterday, but maybe some music would be good. But, you know, I do work as little as toddlers. So, you know, this is, you know, you might think, wow, who would use a cane that size? That's so small. I did have a student, she was 2, and she was a great little gal to practice using a cane this size. So that's pretty small. But so when they are, you know, little, we work on all kinds of concepts and body concepts, concepts about space and time and all that stuff. And as they grow and, you know, develop more and more skills, we work on skills that kindergartners would have. Then we work on skills that first graders, second graders. Often I have a kid from about age 2 to graduation. So whenever they leave the school system, I might have them all of those years, like it or not, on their end. I usually like all of them. I think I've had one that I thought, oh, not that one again. But mostly I like all the kids, and we get along pretty well. So I'm trying to think of what else. You know, like I said, we work in the area of visual impairment. We are kind of methods and materials people. So we feel like if you have the right methods and the right teaching and the right materials, then you can learn all of the same kinds of things that the sighted kids are learning. So that's our job. We're to provide Braille instruction. We provide you know, instruction in the use of the white cane, low vision devices, you know, all sorts of things, various kinds of technology. But again, the idea is to be able to do the same content as their peers. Yeah, so I think that's, I'm much more short-winded than Rob.
Sorry. I'm long-winded.
I was going to say too, though, so when students leave us, that's not the end of the road, figuratively, for them. So if there are adults, either students that we see or people who become blind as an adult, you know, the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons is available and out there, and they pick up those clients and provide similar kinds of services that we provided in the school. Oh, hey, I had one more thing to say, and that is that we need people in our profession. So if any of y'all are looking to pick up a new job or something, talk to me. I'm all done. I'm not, well, unless we want to have a sing-along or something.
Okay.
No, I'm just joking.
Wow. Well, that's all right. Candace is surprising me there. I'm like, oh, my. But very important, and I know we're probably going to have some questions for sure a little later that you can address and things. So thank you. Now we're going to move on to Cindy Gray, and you are going to talk to us now and take it away.
Okay. First of all, hello everybody. I'm Cindy, and I work for Disability Network Southwest Michigan, which is a center for independent living. The centers were founded by Ed Roberts and Judy Heumann during the Civil Rights Movement in Berkeley, California, many years ago. There are centers all over the U.S., Canada, and Europe. Our center, Disability Network Southwest Michigan, covers 8 counties. Our main office is in Kalamazoo, and our local office is housed in the same building with Area Agency on Aging in St. Joe. We cover in St. Joe, Berrien, and Cass counties, and our office in Kalamazoo covers 6 other counties. Kalamazoo County, Berry, Calhoun, Branch, St. Joseph, and Van Buren counties. The brochures that are in your packet will also tell you about our services. But why I'm in this work is I have a daughter who's 48 with disabilities. Our staff identifies 50% as having disabilities or family members. So that's just a little bit about the staff that we have presently. We assist families, individuals, anyone with disabilities or their families. Some of our services include information and referral, which I used to do, and it's connecting people with resources like Berrien RESA or any others that the family may need or the person. We help with documentation, finding assistive technology for people. So that's part of the information and referral that we do. We also do the independent living, which is developing advocacy skills for young adults, helping with employment, essential skill training, financial literacy, Social Security disability benefits planning, travel training. Many young students need the transportation, especially in our county. It's very hard. So the travel training for a young adult that's going on their first job, it's important to have the travel training. We also have a RAMP program. Our person that's in charge is in our Kalamazoo office, but it covers all of our counties, and we have application process. So that's another thing that we do, and we have volunteers actually from a few area places, among them Whirlpool, who has helped build a lot of ramps for the communities. We have community transition services, so that's like if a student with disabilities is transitioning to employment or post-secondary education, we have people to assist and help. We also, which I now do, is the advocacy and community education. So we do disability rights advocacy. We have some advocacy groups. We do many, many presentations and workshops, and those brochures are in your packet as well. And we have peer support groups. I will go to the drop-in center from our community mental health, and there's a peer support specialist there. So working together with people who have maybe like disabilities. So those are, some of our services that we offer. Working with the entire family, if there's a child at any age, any person with a disability is who we work with. We collaborate with many agencies as well. It's been great actually being in the Area Agency on Aging building and partnering with them and with PACE too, really. So that's in a nutshell what we do. But like I said, we have many things, presentations on ableism, on disability rights, on leader dogs, support animals. Those are just a few of the things that we do. We try to participate a lot in community. The advocacy is a big thing right now, and I'll tell you, one of the main things is housing for persons with disabilities or seniors. So thank you. See, I'm brief too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I see you all are professionals of many, many words, right? But that's okay. We appreciate the information. I'm not sure, I haven't received any yet, but if there are any questions in the audience, this is the time because we're going to take some questions, Q&A. Then we're going to take a probably 10-minute break, 10 to 15-minute break, and then we'll come back and hear our final two panelists. But while we are doing that, Again, if no one is aware, July of 1990 was the year that President George Bush signed into basically law the Americans with Disabilities Act, and which is a very important law that deals with protecting the rights of those who are in, and it's hard to say diagnosed or whatever, the people that have to deal with the challenges of a disability and making sure that they're not discriminated against, that accommodations are appropriate, and so on, and things. And sometimes, we're going to ask some questions here in a minute, but sometimes people that do have a disability may not be aware of that, and this also includes the education realm as well that this act covers. So I see no questions yet, so I've got some myself, right? So put your thinking hats on. This is not like a game show, right? Well, you could win money, you could not, but okay, you won't win money. But anyway, you will get some good information. So I'm going to start with Dr. Rob for a minute, all right? Again, also being a psychologist and a therapist, right? You know, you talked about music, and of course there has been research, as he pointed out, that deals with helping people use music to actually empower and manage their, you know, emotional, intellectual, and other disabilities that they may, you know, face. And so one of the things that, as you were talking, that comes to mind, you know, is how does someone find a therapist, especially a music therapist, that may be beneficial for, and I know you use the word that, you know, it's new to me, kind of a neurodiversity, which is now, as we talk about, because in our field, they've updated our diagnostic statistical manual. It's now the 5th edition and things like that.
Number 5, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, the DSM-5 and things. And now with the new wording, you know, it's slow to get in there. So maybe the next edition they'll put that in there. But how does one find a music therapist, especially when we're talking about, well, it doesn't matter. If it's a child or an adult, how would someone go about finding a therapist that uses music to help them deal with the emotions, the physical, and so on?
Well, every board-certified music therapist should be findable through the American Music Therapy Association website, which is musictherapy.org. So it's just musictherapy, one word, .org, and that will take you to the AMTA website. And you punch in your zip code and find a music therapist near you.
Okay. So they can go to that website and find a therapist near them. Hopefully they're...
Hopefully. I mean, it's like your profession. We're pretty few and far between. You know, it's a growing profession. We've only been around formally as a credentialed profession since 1950, so it's still, you know, relative to the teaching profession, it's still a rather young profession. So there's not a whole lot of us around, but you know, try your luck. Go to the website and punch in a lot of school districts are warming up to music therapy too. And
Okay.
yeah, so
Our center program.
yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's possible that you can go to your school board and, you know, demand music therapy for your district.
I demand music therapy.
Yeah.
Oh, Tricia's back there. I'm sorry. She's our superintendent, but anyway.
Oh, excellent. Hi.
Okay. So then that leads me to another question. And as I know you're playing your example there, which is actually really catchy, and I love that. How does this, I know you're talking more with children and things like that, but how does that work with adults? Because I would assume, right, that it shouldn't matter, but you may have to adjust based on age or something.
Exactly. You have to adjust your playlist, as it were. Yeah, the example I just did, the sing-along, that is with, you know, 9, 10-year-old kids. With teenagers, you adjust and you have to be sort of conversant with the music of the day. And you often do a lot of lyric analysis, you know, songs that they're listening to, and you analyze the lyrics. Well, what is it that attracts you to this lyric? And you know, what makes this music speak to you? And you get a conversation going that way. With older adults, the older you go, the further back you go in your songbook. So,
Okay.
you know, I mean, I would play, I don't know, I would play Imagine Dragons with teenagers. I would play Simon and Garfunkel with the older folks. I mean,
Okay.
and make those adjustments, depending on, you know, I mean, some older folks would, you know, really be interested in big band and things like that. So, you know, it just depends on who your client is, and there's also no one client fits all. I mean, you can, you know, I mean, I'm sort of speaking to broad stereotypes here, because there are older adults who would like the Imagine Dragons, and there are younger kids who would like the Simon and Garfunkel. So you just don't know until you ask and do an intake and get to know the client, you know, on a one-on-one basis.
Okay.
Yeah,
Very good. And this is, and again, just one more for you.
sure.
So that way you can stop sweating after I get done answering these questions.
Am I sweating? I hope
But, but one of the things that people often ask, right? And when we talk about seeking out a therapist, right, who provides music therapy, you just want anybody that says, I'm a music therapist and can play the piano or whatever, that you want to send or refer someone to, a patient to, or something like that. So what kind of training and education and training goes into becoming a music therapist? And again, I know you talked about the music therapy board that certifies
Yeah, that's right.
that. So again, what goes into the background and training, but also making sure that someone's picking and choosing a therapist that is qualified and knows what they're doing and is not going to cause harm.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, the typical music therapy program is an undergraduate 4-year program. There was some controversy in the field. There was a push to go to master's level entry. It was defeated. I have mixed feelings. But right now, it's a master's. The master's is an optional. It's at least a bachelor's in an approved accredited music therapy program that is accredited by the AMTA. And the AMTA insists that you have to have 4 semesters of music rudimentary background. So you're taking music theory, you're taking ear training, you're taking guitar, you're taking keyboard. And then on top of that, you have to take, you know, a battery of psychology classes. I mean, like abnormal psych and things like that, and basic, your entry-level Psych 101. You have to do practicums, practica, I guess. You have to do practica with established music therapists. And then you have to do a 6-month internship. I mean, I did my 6-month internship in a behavioral health facility doing group therapy with teenagers and young adults. So it was an experience I'll never forget. Yeah.
Awesome. So what you're telling me is, and what I'm hearing is, I didn't have to go through the torture I had to go through to get this PhD thing when I could have stayed 4 years and did what you did. Yes!
Well, there are PhD programs in music therapy
Okay.
that one can elect to do if one, primarily it's if you want to be a professor of music therapy and get tenure and teach at a college level, then go for the PhD, of course. That's not really, I don't think, ahead of me.
Okay, very good.
That's okay.
But it's, yes.
We actually have a question back here, or like a comment that goes with that whole thing. Would you mind if we ask?
Sure.
Go ahead. Okay, I was a neurosurgical ICU nurse for 2 years. And my family would bring in a boombox and bring in the patient's favorite music. Swear to God it brought them back.
Okay.
I swear, you know, and it was amazing and magical to see that music can go to someone that's unresponsive and make them respond. It was really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that.
That is a very
Thank you so much for saying that, because there's a body of research that suggests that music may be the very last thing to go in terms of cognitive
Yes.
awareness.
Right. And that's very important. And I know from a clinical perspective, it's always good if you can collaborate and work with other therapists, especially those that are trained in music therapy, which can make a difference in the patients as we work with. All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, I've got more questions for you if you're ready for these, all right? I think we're going to go to Candace now, put you on the hot spot and everything. We got a couple of questions. I know someone from the audience here has asked if you could discuss, and this is actually a really good one here, can you discuss the employment obstacles that our visually impaired students, or even as they move on to adulthood, face regarding employment, but including some of our young people that are on the autistic spectrum?
Boy, it's not really my specialty to discuss autism, so I'm not sure on that part. But related to visually impaired people, there are a variety of obstacles. One is transportation, which you were talking about. Transportation is a huge obstacle. It really is. They just cannot get, unless you live in a city, but if you live around all the other places that aren't in the city where there's mass transit, then that's a big barrier. Another thing is people are often just so uncomfortable having blind people around because they're doing things, it's serious, it's true, because they're doing things differently, or maybe they don't have good eye contact, and so that makes people uncomfortable. So even, we talk about, do you want to disclose your visual impairment before an interview? Because maybe they're like, oh, I'm so nervous. The person interviewing is so nervous, right? It's supposed to be that the person interviewing would be nervous, right? Oh, I hope I can say all the right things to get the job, but often it's the other way around. The person interviewing is so uncomfortable around the blind person. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that leads me to actually a good segue into the next question.
Okay.
That I have as I was listening to you present and things. What are some of the challenges that our children with a visual impairment face? I mean, we can talk about education things, but what are some of the things that you have witnessed that they have had to face in adjusting and in dealing with their visual impairment, not just educationally, but in all spheres there?
Boy, there are lots of examples, that's for sure. I can tell you just this last week I was talking with a student. He's a teenager, and he went to the Apple Festival, and I didn't go this time. But it's my first time off in years. Anyway, so I said to him, well, tell me one thing about the Apple Festival. And he said, oh, some of my friends said hi to me at the Apple Festival. And I said, because I've had the kid since he's been like 2, so I know most of his friends and stuff. So I said, well, who'd you see? And he says, well, I don't know. I was like, well, they didn't say who they were? No. Did you ask them? No. That's a problem. That's a problem. I think, he was so excited that someone said hello, which is a pretty basic thing, right? But he didn't even know who it was. Yeah. Everybody, So everybody in here is going to remember when they come across a visually impaired person to say, hi, it's, I'm Candace.
Yeah.
How are you today, Joe?
So making that extra effort.
It doesn't take much, though.
Yeah.
But just to say who you are is really helpful.
Okay. And so that's really key in that interpersonal relationship as you dialogue to give information that helps a young person to be able to know, understand, and engage in the environment even more.
And I think, too, for students that I serve, I can give you another example just from this week. So I just discovered that one of my students, I have some students that were born blind and some that are going blind. Probably half of my students are going blind. So one girl is, I just went on a field trip with her class, and I discovered she doesn't know how to go down the stairs. And so I said at the school, well, let's teach her to go down the stairs. No, we're going to get her transportation changed. So, the expectation was, let's just do something different, but I said, well, let's make it so that she can go downstairs forever. You know, let's train her. I'll work with her. Let me train her. Well, that's a work in progress because I got a big no on that. Yeah, no, we will get her changed to a van. She will not have to get on that bus. And so just having appropriate expectations of students or of our, you know, all of our children. Yeah, a lot of times they are not expected to do the work in class. They'll say, well, you know, he takes too long. Or, oh, you know this. Yeah, Rob had one of my students in class as a good friend for many years. There's a lot of things that they're not expected to do. So I think that we do them a disservice by not expecting the same kinds of things that we expect from others.
Okay. And that actually leads to the next question. And even Cindy, I want you to chime in too. Because I know, and Dr. Rob, I want you, all three of you, to kind of chime in on this. Because when we talk about services and providing those services for young people or adults with a disability, you know, we have to deal with some of the things that are kind of thrown at us that we, you know, expectations and other things. But how does that affect you all who provide those services? Because I know for me as, you know, if I'm dealing as a therapist, right, it gets to be a challenge sometimes, and depending on what it is, it may hurt. So how do you all deal with that? What happens with you all?
Say?
I've spoken a lot.
I guess we just try to deal with it and offer the best possible advice that we can. You know, on a daily basis, it's something new every time there's a phone call or every time, you know, and you have to wrap your mind around it and then start digging in to try to find those solutions. And a lot of time it's networking with the fellow agencies too.
Okay.
I mean, networking is important. We were just talking because she had my daughter for some things way back too. And so it's always that teamwork or making those connections in your fellow agencies so that you can work together to solve issues for families or people that need solutions.
Okay. Very good.
And I would just say, I know at RESA, we right now are working on how to be better collaborators. Sometimes people don't want to do the ideas that we have in mind, right? So we're working on being better collaborators, and we have a lot of stick-to-itiveness in our place. So we just keep going. We're like the Energizer bunnies.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. All right. I think I can do a couple of more questions before we break. So now we're going to throw Cindy into the hot spot and everything, but that's okay. These are pretty good questions. Just out of curiosity, then, is how many of your clients that you deal with know their rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act?
And that's one thing I forgot to mention, that we have ADA specialists in our agency.
Okay.
And so that's some of the trainings are on the rights of people and their rights. So a lot of them, some of them coming to us, they don't know for sure. But by the time they leave, they usually do.
Okay.
Our ADA specialist, we do many different things with that. We work with the individuals, we work with cities, like some of the city of St. Joe and stuff, they have us doing their parks, looking at the parks for accessibility, looking at parking, many different things. So that's one facet of the ADA compliance that we do, but then they also do with the individual people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Now, I know we have a question from our audience out there, and this is actually a really interesting one here, because it talks about if someone is under or considered under a disability, once they turn a certain age, like 65, are they no longer considered disabled?
They're always.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try. Is that better? Okay. No, they're not. They're always considered with a disability.
And so that's, I guess that's, if I understand, once you are basically diagnosed or with a disability, it is a lifelong.
Right. You have your doctor has to do that to begin with, like if you're filing for, you know.
For certain,
Yes.
you know, claims with,
Yes.
you know, meeting certain financial needs, medical needs.
Yes.
And things that are provided.
Yes.
Okay.
So that stays.
Right. And so the other question, a little bit more specific here, is do you still help seniors who are disabled, especially with ramps and having those type of accommodations?
Yes,
Okay.
we do. And we work close, like I said, with Area Agency on Aging. So their information and referral and our information and referral, they go hand in hand many times.
Okay.
They have different funding than we do. So many times we'll go back and forth with the ramps because if a person is on a certain program, the funding is provided for the ramp.
Okay.
You know, so we don't want to use the volunteers and the funding that we get from others
Okay.
to do those ramps. But we work collectively with that way. Yeah.
Okay. And for sure, you know, since you are an agency that helps to connect with resources and things, in our Southwest Michigan area, what seems to be, and I know it's a diversity of different needs and things, what seems to be the more common ones that come out or that stick out?
Right now, in the last year, and it's getting worse, for seniors and for persons with disability is housing. Housing is probably the number one with, close tie with transportation.
Okay.
Transportation, we're working on that every day, and it seems to go backwards instead of forward. When somebody has to wait 2.5 hours for a ride to work, it's not acceptable. And so our county needs to look at that, pretty much. And we have, the rural, and we have, the center. Well, somebody who is rural trying to get somewhere right now, say they're in Niles, they need to go to Hollywood to the doctor or to Riverwood, big problem right now.
And you also mentioned housing. What seems to be the contributor for the housing issue?
Lack of housing.
Okay. Lack of housing.
Lack of housing, not enough, for sure.
Not enough
that's the
housing.
Yeah.
Is there a
Of
financial?
affordable housing.
Okay, so lack of housing, is there a financial component related to that as well, or just the lack of?
The lack of housing and like for some people on disability or seniors, the income is lower, and there's not enough of the complexes that provide for that.
Okay.
And right now, we have many issues at different complexes, and that's part of my job, is to advocate for those. No elevator in an apartment complex since April. The apartment complex in St. Joe, those people are going to all have to move for a period of time while they do major
Repairs.
things. And that whole thing is going to be a major, I don't even know how it's going to pan out for those people. So it's things like that, and it's not in one city, it's in many.
Many, so
Yeah.
this is I would say a universal
Yes.
phenomenon, because it's just not one place, it's all over.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you. All right, one last question before we break. Oh, I see a hand.
Yeah, this goes along with the housing issue, kind of. I have a friend that lives right over here on Mill Farm, and they have issues with their security systems,
So now, yeah, okay.
And the management says they can't afford to repair.
Hmm.
This is HUD.
Yeah.
Okay. I do have someone I'm working with at Mill Pond. I've heard about everything going on there, and I'm familiar. And it's just another, and we're also talking and working with Fair Housing.
Okay.
They have new people, and I've come to know the one quite well lately,
Okay.
and she's been very helpful. But this is a very big and sad situation,
Mm.
very bad,
She doesn't feel safe there at
Mm.
times.
right?
We had a package misdelivered that she was very concerned about because she had to pay in advance
Mm.
a large sum of money that she was concerned about losing her money.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's just a lot of issues over the security and, it being HUD subsidized.
Right.
It's like, why isn't these things taken care of?
Yes, we've been asking the same questions of HUD.
Yeah.
The turnover at Fair Housing has been difficult because there was someone there a long time, and then they've had a big turnover. So that's been an issue too. But we are working with some people at Mill Pond. I just want you to know that we're aware and trying. They're going to start talking people to HUD, and we're starting to file complaints.
Okay. And just for those who are in our live stream land, right? The question was asked from our young lady here about some concerns that are happening at one of our apartment complexes here in the city of Buchanan that serves our senior population and also those that have disabilities, and the concern about the security issues and other things. And Cindy has shared that they are working diligently with the situation, but it's always a challenge in things, especially hearing about turnover and things in those organizations.
Yeah.
It's just, it can be very frustrating.
And sometimes we have people that tend to go to the manager to speak up, and then they're targeted. And there's been people that have come up with eviction notices lately.
Mm, okay.
And it's one of the main things right now in my daily routine is the housing. Yeah.
Right. And that is not a fair way to approach things, targeting actually, and if they're doing that, is a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act because it is discriminatory and things. And so, for sure, connecting with Cindy is very important. And this will lead to our last question before we take a break for 15 minutes, which falls along this same line here. And it deals with, because all of you are in the area of not only providing services, but advocacy, right? Advocacy for people that are dealing with disabilities. And what does that mean for you in your particular areas that you provide services for? What does advocacy mean for you in those different areas? So we can start with Candace.
Boy, what does advocacy mean to me? You know, I feel like I do a lot of advocating every day, but also teaching students to advocate for themselves. You know, the example I gave about my student who's had some friends say hello, and lots of times I'm there and I can make that go smoothly, but the bigger job that I have is to teach students to advocate for themselves. So I think that's really important if you can get people to advocate for themselves. And even, you know, even so much as I have one young lady, and she goes to our center program, and she was really, really, really liking to see if she could find this one fellow in the school. She wanted to find him in the worst way. So, you know, she had some ways of going about it, and I worked with the speech therapist and said, you know, what can we get this young lady to do so that she can find the young man she's looking for? And so we practiced together, and he's now graduated, so she's got to, you know, find a new squeeze or something. But anyway, she, you know, even her, you know, teaching her to advocate for herself. I'm looking for someone, how do I find them?
Okay, very good.
And I think that's true, is getting the person to speak up for themselves as well, because we can speak up for them, but we're not going to always be there. You know, so they need to give people that they can do it. I think, yeah.
Yep, even on little things, but on big things
Right.
too. Like big things like your housing, but little things like I can't find the boy I'm looking for.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't start with housing.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're all unanimous in this. Yeah, I in my music therapy clientele, I really try to strive to give a lot of healthy choices, and to impart upon the clients that you know there's you know that it's up to them to be self-advocates. I mean I cited the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network in my presentation. They talk about something called the burrito rule. Have you ever heard of that? The burrito rule is if you're not able to go downstairs into your own kitchen and get your own burrito at 2 a.m, then you're not actually free.
Okay.
And
I have to try that out now.
but in all seriousness, I mean there are people that are, you know, sort of warehoused in disability terms, and not given a whole lot of choice, not encouraged to to advocate for their own choice making, and that needs to change.
Okay. And it's very important because it sounds like empowerment and resiliency building is very important. You know, you're there to advocate, but it also comes down to the individual to also empower, speak up for themselves, and fight for what they need or would like.
And I think that's important, and I have to watch because my daughter's 48, and so I have to step back and say, okay, Julie,
Yes.
you do
Yeah.
it, you know.
Yeah.
So you have to have that fine, you know, with parents too. It's
Yeah.
like, we have to step back
Yeah.
and let the young adult do.
So the power of maintaining, I call it boundaries, in the sense
Yeah.
of, okay,
Yeah.
you know, you can. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It's complex because, you know, sometimes you're dealing with children, and sometimes you're dealing with grown adults. And with children, you know, like anything, with like non-disabled children even, you still have, you know, age-appropriate boundaries. You still have age-appropriate ideas of, you know, they can self-advocate to a degree, but they can't get out of doing their homework.
Right.
Whereas with adults, you know, who have civil rights, fully fledged civil rights, that's a different matter. And you know, the ADA, I think, is incredibly important. I think it's a good first step. It's, you know, 30 years old now, isn't it? Something like that. Yeah. And you know, I think it's time to continually encourage, you know, adult disabled people to advocate for themselves and to support those organizations that advocate with them collaboratively.
So it sounds like we've come a long way, but we still got a ways to go.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, that's going to bring us to, I don't want to say halftime, but we're going to be coming to a break for about 10 minutes in our important forum on disabilities and impairments and looking at that. And we've heard some really good stuff already in the first half. We don't want to miss the second half here because we do have Lisa and Ann that are also going to bedazzle us with some additional information. Would you like the word bedazzle? Yes. All right. But they're going to provide some more powerful information and insight and stories about this important topic. So stay tuned. Come on back in 10 minutes. Good job, people.
Okay, then definitely do that because
exactly. It's just, it's a process because of.
Harvey, I want to introduce you to my grandson. This is Carter Ernsberger, Harvey Burnett, school board president, chief of police. I'm teaching him all about politics today.
Yeah, how many seconds we got? 5 seconds? Whoa! Oh, my. You said take 2, take 6? All right. We are back. Live, is everything good out in live stream land? Well, again, we'd like to welcome you back to our very important, very informative, and very fascinating forum here dealing with disabilities and impairments. And now we're going to go into our last two speakers that will talk to us, again, thinking about the 15, 20 minutes or so. But as they are speaking, think of questions that you would like to ask, and make sure you write those down, get them to us. And when we come to our public questions and dialogue, we will address those at the time. So I'm going, since I need to make sure I'm following the order I was told, I don't know what that is, but I'm making it up as I go, right? But as we go, we're going to be hearing now from Lisa, and of course, both Lisa and Ann are members of our One Buchanan. And so we're going to now give the floor over to Lisa. Take it away.
Thank you, Harvey.
All right.
I am Lisa Dahl, and I'm happy to be here today to share my story with you in hopes that it'll inspire some of you and that you can learn something that you didn't know before today. My background, I have a bachelor's of applied sciences and commercial art. I'm a mother of a beautiful daughter and a grandmother of two spunky granddaughters, ages 6 years old and 14-year-old. I have a twin brother and one older sister. I grew up in a suburb called Rochester outside of, or north of Detroit in Oakland County. In the second half of my life, my parents retired and moved to northern Michigan and bought a house on the mainstream DeSalvo River. From there, I went to college in Traverse City, where I got my degree. And I've lived in Michigan, Arkansas, Missouri, and North Carolina. But the reason I'm here today, what brought me here, was an accident that happened to me when I was a child. At age 4.5 years old, I was adventurous and I went outside when I wasn't supposed to be. And my dad was in the front yard on a riding lawnmower, mowing the lawn. It was a normal summer morning. My mom had just gone into town to get her hair done, and my sister had gotten my twin brother and I cleaned up after breakfast and dressed, and I ran out the front door. And as I was skipping along the sidewalk, well, first let me say it was a beautiful day. I wanted to be outside playing. So I was skipping down the sidewalk, and I slipped on some wet grass clippings from where my father had been mowing. At that very moment, my dad was looking on the opposite side, backing up, and that is when the accident occurred. I slipped and fell. And that was in 1966. And in that very moment, the lives of my entire family changed forever in the blink of an eye. What followed was 23 reconstructive surgeries that throughout my childhood and young adult life, which eventually led to my elective surgery of having my leg amputated in 2008 at the age of 46. You're probably wondering why elective amputation. Well, I began having a lot of pain in 2007, and the quality of life had become my quality of life had been greatly diminished. I thought I just needed another surgery like all the times before, and after seeking an appointment with an orthopedic surgeon and more x-rays and an exam, they said there was nothing more that they could do for me, and slid a prescription across the table for some very hard narcotics and said, this is all we can offer at this point. Well, at the time, I was a single mother. I was divorced, and that wouldn't do. I wasn't about to become addicted to narcotics. So I went and saw another very specific doctor who was a physiatrist, and after having one specific test done, I was given very dismal results, and she compassionately explained to me that I would do well and as an above-knee amputee with the new prosthetics that they have out. So the decision was made. Although I have physical challenges and altered mobility every single day since the original accident at age 4.5, after becoming an above-knee amputee, I quickly learned the world has it's much less accessible place for me to live in. My new adaptive mobility challenges were drastically elevated. I had to learn all over again how to walk. That may sound odd, but when you lose 2 major joints in your ankle and your knee, your ability to move your residual limb and your trunk completely change. Many months later, I was able to stand with the assistance of a cane, and there were other hurdles to address. I often faced challenges inside and outside that included stairs, deep steps, curbs, and the lack of handicap-accessible walkways and restrooms. And sometimes there are no walkways, or there are gravel parking lots or sandy surfaces that aren't flat, which require me to change how I move. All these daily challenges, which I sometimes can overcome with a degree of great difficulty and/or danger. When I first put on my prosthetic, I had to adjust to the feeling of it. It was uncomfortable. It was heavy and awkward. It didn't feel like my leg. And it felt like a foreign object strapped to me like a bowling ball on the end of a hinged pole. Getting the visual of that, it wasn't great. And it was not only physically challenging, but mentally challenging as well. And I had to accept that this was my new normal. I had to accept it was a part of me. You know, at first, I didn't know what to do with it, but with guidance from the prosthetist, my physiatrist, which is a sports and rehab medicine doctor, and my extremely knowledgeable physical therapist and personal cheerleader, Becky Rausch, who is here today, I was able to overcome most of my initial challenges of becoming a new amputee. And in addition, I had loving support from my daughter, Marina, and my life partner, Rick, and who were always looking for ways to make life easier for me. So to help folks understand that don't know anybody with lower limb amputation, what we go through on a daily basis, I've put some facts together for you. An above-knee amputee requires a wheelchair to use when they take their prosthetic off at home, for travel or even in the event of great distances of walking. We can't wear our prosthetics 24/7. Our skin needs to breathe, and with multiple layers of a liner, a sleeve, a socket, our skin can't breathe. So we have to be able to take it off and use our wheelchairs. And in the event our prosthetic fails, we need to use our wheelchairs until our prosthetic can be repaired, which can vary from a week to a month or sometimes several months. And on occasion, I do get a loaner leg from the company, but even that, it's different and it's awkward, so it's just not the same. Another fact, because of these multiple layers that I have to don, I have lost a third of my body's surface that allows me to cool my body by sweating. Now, I still sweat, and because of the liner and all these other materials are on there, when I sweat, the liner starts to slip and piston, and then eventually just falls off. So it's not convenient, and it's very difficult to hop, and it's not advised to hop. So there are a lot of challenges in that way. On an average, an above-knee amputee falls 3 times a year. An above-knee amputee uses 65% more energy than a normal person doing the exact same activity. So for me to walk is the same amount of energy it takes for a person with 2 normal limbs to run. So we use 49% more oxygen to do the same movement a normal person would. And so for this reason, above-knee amputees have to condition their muscles to use less oxygen just to walk or do higher level activities. And this is an ongoing fight for the rest of our lives. Not all prosthetics are the same. Some are spring-loaded manual knees, which is usually what you get right after you get up and start walking, and I'm lucky enough to have a computerized leg that I charge like our cell phones every night. But sometimes those don't always work as planned, just like our automobiles that fail. Sometimes the battery goes dead and takes away those safety features, and I take a dirt nap. And it's, you know, gravity can be very cruel, but these are things that happen that people don't stop to think about. Restrooms. This was mentioned a couple different times by some of our panelists. It may seem odd that I'm talking about public restrooms, but to any normal person, you'd think I'd be able to use it like any other normal person, but I can't. As an above-knee amputee, I need at least one handicap rail to grasp to lower and to also pull myself up. You know, and it's, for the older buildings, they are grandfathered in where the American Disabilities Act doesn't always apply. And it's very difficult for somebody with mobility issues like myself and other people, because there are times when I've gone into a business or a restaurant where they didn't have to, or they weren't required to have handicap rails or accessibility to a bathroom, and the bathroom stall was so small I couldn't even close the door because of my prosthetic leg. And I had to sit sideways, and then there was no way for me to get up once I sat down. So it's tricky and it's very frustrating. But life being an amputee has its challenges, but it also continues to teach me the patience when I see other people with physical limitations who use adaptive equipment to appreciate their daily struggles. I have the same daily struggles as all of you. I get cut off in traffic, you know, I go into the kitchen and wonder what I was there for. But I also have the concerns of, you know, when I go out and to meet a friend at a restaurant, does it have a gravel or paved parking lot? Will I be able to use the restroom? And these are all very real day-to-day concerns. You know, for a local example here in Buchanan, there would be the Union Coffee House, which does not have accessibility. It's difficult to get in and out. So the ultimate goal would be have the majority of public places to be handicap accessible. Entrances to buildings and restaurants and the bathrooms, shops, and any types of services. In addition, there are many resources available to amputees through the Amputee Coalition, which can be accessed through their website, which is www.amputee-coalition.org, such as support groups, network, peer support. They have a National Limb Loss Resource Center and many other different helpful resources that you can find on that site. So there are other additional resources, even on Facebook. There are multiple Facebook amputee sites that you can seek out. There's also a physical therapist who specializes in the lower body limb loss. Her name is Cosi Beloso, and she's out of the Tampa area. She has a show on Facebook, and she also puts it on YouTube called Cosi Talks. It's C-O-S-I, and she's brilliant. I've worked with her personally, and she's another good resource. So disabilities can change the way we operate in day-to-day life, even in spaces familiar as our homes. But public spaces become challenging spaces, full of obstacles when new disabilities impact our lives. Stairs, bathrooms, doorknobs, and certain surfaces become suddenly hazardous to us. They can be addressed by replacing stairs with handicap-accessible ramps. An elevator should be considered. And a lot of business owners would probably cringe at this idea, but there are resources and grants that can help the business owner with addressing those things. And they also have what they call freestanding elevators as well as shaftless elevators. And those can cost anywhere from between $15,000 and $25,000. But in addition to that, there are tax benefits. They not only increase the value of the building, but the building owner or the business owner can have tax write-offs. So that's huge too. Removing barriers in bathrooms, which makes it easier for people if they're in a wheelchair. Updating the toilet. Now, again, this may sound odd, but the height of the toilet is a huge, huge difference, especially if somebody has limb loss that is using a prosthetic. So updating the toilets, replacing or adding handrails to certain areas. I talked about doorknobs. They can be cumbersome for people who have different challenges, but doorknobs might seem to be a simple thing to one person, and it's very challenging for another, especially if you have a cane in your hand. So rearranging the furniture in a business or adding furniture that is more friendly. Those are just a few of the things, but you know, today also I wanted to bring further awareness to you about childhood injuries involving lawnmowers, because that's how I got hurt, and it happened just that quick. Despite regulations currently in place, the incidence of lawnmower injuries in children has not decreased for several decades in the United States. In fact, studies in several countries have shown that incidence of riding lawnmower injuries are on the rise worldwide, and they tend to be devastating and limb-threatening. Each year, approximately 9,400 children are injured by lawnmowers per year, and over 1,000 of those in the U.S. alone that are run over by riding lawnmowers or small tractors, and 600 of those result in amputation. So it's a lot, it's a big number. 1 in 5 deaths involves a child from lawnmower accidents. Children under 10 are most commonly caused, the children in the age group of under 10 years old have major limb loss because of riding lawnmowers. Children should have at least 12 years of old to operate a push walk-behind mower, or at 16 years old to be on a riding lawnmower. And if you see, and I guess a part of the other aspect of me being here today is I want to say that if you see an amputee struggling or anyone who has a physical disability, have a bit of compassion for their struggle. You know, show a little bit more patience. If you have the opportunity and the energy, advocate to the business owner that the public space that they have should be accessible to people with different mobilities, and encourage them to research their options or grants that might be available to help offset installation of handicap accessible ramps, shaftless elevators, and modifications to old infrastructures. There's a lot of different things that small business funding for the American Disability Accessibility, Small Business Funding for American Disability Act accessibility compliance. There's a lot of different resources out there. I did bring multiple copies of resources if anybody is interested, but there are ways to accommodate people with disabilities. And the other thing that business owners need to know, they're losing business, because there's a lot of people that, you know, outwardly you might not think they have a disability, but they will avoid your business if it is not handicap friendly. And I have done that time and time again since 2008. And it's frustrating and it's sad, because then the people I'm with will say, well, we won't go there then. We will go to somewhere where there is handicapped accessibility. So what I would like to have the group take away from this today is that we all have struggles. We have things that we have to overcome, but there are instances where the community can come together and try to be proactive and change the infrastructure of any town or city to make it more accessible for people with mobility disabilities. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lisa. Very powerful story. Now we're going to end with our final panelist, Ann Reed, and take it away.
Okay. I don't think I have that much in me, but I will try to live up to the group. I would like to say to the first 2 women who spoke, though, just thank you for that information, and I really wish I knew you 7 years ago. And to Lisa, I think her and I are both an example of why everybody, and I wish more people who don't have disabilities would come to things like this, because we're examples of people who certainly never expected to have disabilities in our life. They just happen. So you can sit there and be healthy and have a great diet and take good care of yourself, and it can still happen to you. You just never know. And my particular story happened in 2015. I was very healthy. I was very normal. Well, maybe I was a workaholic. I had 2 jobs. I was a college administrator. I was a part-time instructor of political science at a community college. And I could say that I didn't necessarily want to stay in my job forever, so I decided to go back and work on my PhD in political science, and I wanted to transition to an academic career. And I also had a husband and 2 kids, and I was a busy girl. I think that's what they call burning the candle at both ends. I had very regimented schedules. I would get up the day before the stroke. I got up at 7 a.m., went to work. I could get about 4 or 5 hours in where nobody was really there. And then I would transition to the next part of my life, school, and then the next part of my life, which was family. Very regimented to get it all done. And the morning, or that night, I had gone out with some friends, came back very early Saturday morning, woke up. My husband was supposed to have gone to a golf outing, and he was still hanging around. He said the outing had gotten canceled. And I said, well, I don't feel right. I don't feel good. And he said, well, like, what do you mean? And I said, I don't know. I just don't feel right. Something's wrong. And he said, do you want to go to the doctor? And I said, no, I think I'm going to lay back down in bed and see how it goes. Maybe I'll feel better. So I didn't feel better. I got up, and all of a sudden, my chest, it just was going, it was like out of control. My heart was just beating like crazy. And horrible headache. And I called for him, and I said, I think I have to go to the emergency room. And I didn't even go to like a regular doctor ever. Like, I just didn't do that. I hated doctors. And he was like, wow, oh, okay. So in the car I go. I decide, no, I need to throw up. I don't want to throw up in the car. So no, stop, and I have to go back to the house. And long story short, he found me a few minutes later. I had collapsed in the bathroom, and he called an ambulance. And got to the ambulance came, took me away. It was very scary. Put an IV in me, which I ripped out of my arm because I was just petrified. Started hyperventilating. I passed out probably before I got to the hospital. I don't remember. I remember not being able to breathe, and then I just don't remember anything else. So the rest is, hearsay, because I was unconscious at this point. I am told, once I got to the hospital, I coded. I went into cardiac arrest. They did resuscitate me, obviously. That the first time took for maybe 10 minutes, and I went back into cardiac arrest, and they worked on me again for another 18 minutes or so, and they brought me back again for the second time. And probably my youth was in my favor, and that's probably why they could have walked away from possibly someone who they didn't consider had a great chance of surviving such a catastrophic cardiac event, but they did keep working on me, fortunately. So the next thing I know is, excuse me, sorry, is I wake up blind, and I can't see anything. My mom's yelling at me, Ann, wake up! Just like I was 16 years old and didn't want to get out of bed that school morning. And this part of my life, it was difficult. I woke up, I didn't really understand what was going on. My brain had gone through a lot. I was told later I had had multiple strokes, that they had told my family, they had done an MRI, they had no idea what was going on. They knew I had brain activity, but what brain activity I had, not really sure. And this had I was still in Niles at the time. All of this happened in Niles. And so I always do like to shout out for, local health care. Gets a bad rep sometimes. But Niles, Lakeland, it was Lakeland at the time, really they saved my life. They went over and beyond and really saved my life. And at that point, they couldn't help me though. I had had a stroke. My brain was starved of oxygen for quite a while, and my organs had a lack of oxygen. They were starting to shut down. So my kidneys weren't functioning any longer. I had to have dialysis. And at that time, anyways, Lakeland, Niles did not have dialysis in the hospital. And they didn't think I would survive trips to Lakeland, St. Joe, to get dialysis every day. And so they had to kind of make a decision, and their decision was to try to get me to Grand Rapids in a facility that could handle all of those things. And that's harder to do than one might think. Because again, I wasn't going to survive an ambulance trip, so you couldn't take me to Grand Rapids in an ambulance. It was really only going to be a helicopter ride that was going to be sustainable for me. So that's, again, not easy to do. They don't just send down the helicopter. That has to be paid for. And the college I worked for at the time advocated for me. I was really lucky. The president of the college advocated for me, talked to someone up there, said, you know, I think her insurance should pay for it, but if it doesn't, we got it covered. Please come get her. And I was really lucky. And so they came and they got me, and they took me up to Grand Rapids to the Meyer Heart Center there. And they were able to do dialysis that I needed, and eventually I stabled out, and here I am today. I do have, so first of all, obviously I have to advocate for work-life balance, obviously. You know, I used to be like die-hard workaholic. If my staff took too many, you know, vacation days or sick days, I got all over them. They called in sick, I didn't believe them. I wouldn't let them text me that they were sick. I wanted to hear their voice so I knew for sure they were sick. I was a little draconian. And I gotta say, that is, just please don't be like that with take your vacation. I had so much vacation time accrued that I was able to, so this stroke happened in September 2015. I had enough vacation and sick time accrued that I got my full pay through November of the next year. That's ridiculous. Nobody should ever have that much sick time. So please don't do that. I would have rolled my eyes at anyone who told me this 8 years ago, but I am a diehard believer now. My residual issues, I have quite a few of them. One of them is just I have left-sided weakness. That manifests so my knee and up is pretty much completely back, but my ankle and my left foot still has a lot of issues. I have something called foot drop, which, if you don't know what that is, when you walk, your feet should they kind of go up as you walk. It's kind of, you don't necessarily notice it, but they do a little bit. And my left foot doesn't do that, so I tend to drag it, and I'll trip over it, and I'll fall. And falls happen. Falls happen, and the last bad fall was 2019, and I did break my kneecap. And it really scares me, you know, for the future, because I was stuck in a wheelchair for several months because of that. And it made it a little more difficult because I didn't have a partner. I had been married for about 17 years, and my husband actually filed for divorce in rehab, which sounds horrible, but it was a pretty tumultuous marriage, and we were very, you know, not very nice to each other, so it made sense, actually, that he left me at that time, but it was really hard to be without a partner, as it sounds like you were, too. And my family really stepped up. I had an amazing family, but it also meant I had to move back in with my parents at age 40. I mean, I was only 40 years old when this happened. I had kids at home, And my parents really had to take over for me because my brain wasn't functioning properly at the time. My father had power of attorney over me financially. The other residual issue is my vision. Well, I shouldn't say my vision, but my cognitive processing of what I see has been significantly deteriorated, and I still have issues with that. And that is a much bigger issue than any physical issue that I actually have. It affects my ability to read. So you guys are lucky. I can't read anything off. I have like 6 bullet items that I wanted to cover because normally I would have loved to have read my notes, but I can't read like that. I can read, but where it would take me a day to read a novel 7 years ago, it would probably now take me about 6 months, and I would require sitting alone in my house with, you know, nothing going on around me in order to concentrate like that. So I lost my job because of that. And I just, you know, I wish, I said a little while ago, you know, I wish I knew you guys were out there because I had no idea what to do. I had no idea where to go. I didn't have, like I said, I didn't have a strong partner to advocate for me in any way. I had parents who I couldn't have possibly have expected to be able to even know how to navigate the system of social services or that network that exists. So I had to know all of that stuff or just not be availed to it, which is what happened. And I went, I'm sorry, I'll try to make this brief, but I just want people to know that this kind of stuff happens. I wanted to work. I tried to go back to work. They said, nope, you have to take a cognitive exam before you can go back to work. And so I said, well, okay, but am I going to be, I knew enough. I was a political science teacher. I knew about ADA. So I said, will I be accommodated for my visual issues? And they said, yep, it's not a it's not a vision test, it's a cognitive test. Okay, so I go there and I say, so how are you accommodating me for my visual issues? And they said, you have visual issues? I said, well, yes. And so they had no accommodations available for me for my visual issues. So I took this test, no accommodations, I can't read. Part of the test is like I'm not kidding, a 600 question inventory on how I feel about all these different things. Couldn't possibly get through it. And it was just a horrible experience. And of course, a few weeks later, I find out I have failed the cognitive exam. And I was pretty sure that wasn't legal, but I wasn't exactly sure. And I had nowhere to go. I couldn't hire an attorney because all of my money was tied up in the retainer for my attorney for my divorce. And so it was a really ugly situation, and I lost my job. And I still don't really know what the answer is. But it was a really bad situation. So one of the other residual effects I have from all of this over the years had been depression. I mean, losing my job. I lost where I lived. I lost my partner, which wasn't a horrible thing, but that partner was trying to take my kids from me because they said that I was too disabled to take care of my children. So he was trying to get full custody of my children. And it was a horrible situation. So anyways, I just wish I had had the resources because I didn't know. I didn't know what was out there for me, and I wish that there was a better system somehow where people who went through what I went through knew how to connect to those resources. I don't drive a whole lot. I now have a wonderful partner in my life who say hi, Steve. Who is, more of a partner than my husband of 17 years had been. So I'm really lucky, but part of that depression I was talking about was wondering if anybody would ever want me, and this, to become single after having this kind of disability was just devastating. And I just thought I would never meet anybody that I liked back, who liked me for who I was. So it's been, pretty amazing in some ways too. So that's my story, and I think I hit all my bullet points.
two powerful stories. I'm actually pretty speechless, and I got to know more about Lisa and Ann from what they shared, right, and things like that. And for me, I appreciate letting us be a part of hearing your experience and your story. Very powerful in things, but also letting others know that they're not alone, and that it's very important to know stories, but know who you can connect with, get support from, and things. Before we wrap up, a couple of other questions real quick for you. One of the things that I heard from both of you, which seems that is about the importance of social supports. Can you both say something about that? Because I know we have research that says a lot about your social support networks in helping you to deal with mental health issues, disabilities, and other things that we may we face. So could you say a little bit more about the importance of social supports for you both?
I can speak from experience. When I was scheduled to have my leg amputated, the surgeon who I worked with, who was the head of cardiovascular surgery at U of M, was working with a gentleman who was going through the prosthetic program to be a prosthetist. And he had him meet with me, and I had no idea when he walked in the room that he was an amputee. But he said, "Guess what, I'm your mentor." And I said, "Okay, so what does that mean?" And he sat down, he pulled his pant leg up, and he goes, "This is what you're gonna get." I said, "Oh, all right." So he said, "I want you to know, you have any questions about anything," he says, "you call me, you text me." He says, "I don't care if you're having a bad night." He says, "Shoot me a text, give me a call," he says, "and I'll help you." And he said then there was other things that you had access to, like the Amputee Coalition of America. And then, but there were times still when I got back home in northern Michigan, and Rick was doing his best to try to take care of me, and they had me on all these medicines, and he called my girlfriend, he says, "Listen, you gotta come get her and take her to the doctor because she is just beside herself. She can't function. She doesn't know how to survive in this new body." And so a lot of it was getting off a lot of the drugs, because they just like to write those prescriptions, which are often very devastating. Some of them are good for short-term maintenance, but the social aspect of it, being secluded and not knowing those resources, it's hard to advocate for yourself when you're initially going through a tremendous life change, a physical change. And if you have people that are close to you or friends, they need to advocate for you. Rick has advocated for me. My girlfriend, Lori, had advocated for me. And there are many other people that had to step up and say, "Well, isn't there something more we could do?" So that's a huge part of it. And then sometimes you just have to find the gumption yourself within you to reach out and just ask questions, because there is no stupid question. The worst they can say is no. But then sometimes you don't accept that, and then you just keep making calls or you send emails, and you just don't give up. Don't give up.
Ann?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I had my friends were my work friends, and when that was no longer a part of my equation, there was a huge gaping hole for me. So, you know, again, I mean, going back to a work-life balance, your life should be you should have friends that are outside of work. You should have, I just didn't have a real significant non-work life. My family was amazing to me. My siblings, who I was not like overly close to. My sister lives in the Grand Rapids area. My brother lives just in Niles, but you know, he's got his own kids, his own life. So we were not necessarily close, but man, when my issues happened, they definitely stepped up and were amazing. And when I got divorced, when I was trying to get my kids, one of the things, sorry, I touched my thing again. I had to get a house in order to get my kids. I had to get a house. And I was very lucky. I had the ability to get a down payment on a house in Buchanan, or else I wasn't going to get my kids. And my friends, I can say the friends, actually they were work friends, and my family really stepped up. And I mean, they did all this work. I got a house that was in foreclosure, and they stepped up, and I wouldn't have had my kids if it hadn't been for those kinds of connections. So I am very appreciative of my friends and family.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I know as we're getting ready to wrap down, I'm going to take a few more minutes, but do at least one more question, because this speaks to when we talk about people with disabilities and things, and some of them, you know, can be related to birth, and others coming later based on accidents and things of that nature. But one of the things that when we talk about dealing with disabilities, we're also talking about grief and loss. And actually, it's a little bit more, we call it complicated grief and loss just because of that. And there's things that, as you heard in their stories about job loss or loss of family supports and things like that. But the flip side of that is the resiliency that has been also shown. And maybe could you say at least one thing that you use, a resilient behavior that has helped you to not let what the disability define you or keep you down?
Sense of humor. You got to be able to laugh at yourself. There are things that are going to be out of your control. I mean, they say that the only true environment that you can control is within the walls of your home. And sometimes that's not even possible. So if you take things too seriously, and I mean, we're all human, we all have our bad moments. It's going to happen. But you kind of have to just take a breath and say, well, yeah, that wasn't on my to-do list for today, but it happened, so, you know, and then you ask for help.
Okay.
I look at it from when I did work, you know, the Mega Millions would get to be $400 million, and everyone would start talking about what they would do if they won the lottery. And number one on everyone but me's list was, I'd quit my flipping job. Well, guess what? I don't have a job. So kinda, I won the lottery. Because, you know, I'm alive, and I'm okay financially, and I have learned about other things that are important in life, and other things have taken that place, so.
Okay,
yeah.
Very good. Wrapping it up in the final minute before Ruth comes up and closes us out, I want just a few seconds for each one of you to share with us a takeaway that everyone can leave with, something that you want to impart and ingrain, something. Let's start with Dr. Rob.
Sure. Candace actually spoke about the fear of blind people that she has seen in society, and I would say that you know, disabled people are not to be feared because it's really a fear of difference, and you know, I think differences and diversity is something to be celebrated. And so I would just say, try to resist the fear that you feel if you feel fear of disabled people.
All right. Candace.
For me, I guess I would say always identify yourself, and you know, when you're speaking to a blind person, and don't avoid them because it feels awkward, but just go right up and identify yourself and carry on as if they don't have a disability.
Okay. Cindy.
I think this is along the lines that we see disability as a natural part of the human condition, period.
Okay. Lisa.
We may look different, but we're not any different than anybody else. We're all the same.
Yes.
We have the bad days, the good days. And if you see somebody struggling, just say, hey, can I give you a hand? And either we'll say, yeah, that would be great, or I've got it.
Okay. Ann.
I think we should just try very hard to appreciate the positive you know, the positives of today instead of focusing on the negatives, so.
All right. There you have it. Let's give a round of applause for our panel. Again, a very powerful forum. And again, thanking One Buchanan for putting this together. And I know we get a lot of good information and a lot of, I guess, encouragement and things from hearing from our panelists and experts. And I really appreciate this and really appreciate the stories that have been shared. And I've learned a lot today. So Ruth Ryder, the chair of One Buchanan, will close us out here.
Thank you. The panel was amazing. You know, I learned so much about disability. I've worked with students who were disabled. And I think something that perhaps Dr. Rob, you mentioned, it's important for all people, all students, to interact with those who are disabled rather than setting a certain group aside, because all doctors will have to deal with those who are less able than they are, and all who are less abled will have to deal with doctors. So it goes all the way from A to Z. So we want to thank our sponsors at this time. Berrien RESA, Buchanan Area Senior Center, Buchanan Galeen Lions Club, the City of Buchanan, Disability Network, and DPM Events. We also thank Dr. Harvey Burnett, our wonderful panel speakers, and our many volunteers who made this forum possible. Thank you so much. We especially thank the Berrien Community Foundation for the grant we received for this forum. Again, thank you for sharing your Saturday, fall Saturday afternoon with us. One Buchanan appreciates your attendance and input, questions, and please encourage those who were not able to attend today to see us on YouTube, Facebook. We look forward to future forums, advocacy, and activities. One Buchanan hopes that you too will join us in these endeavors, and have a great rest of the weekend. Thank you.